Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we're going to be covering another grammar pattern. Yeah! Okay, so the grammar pattern that we're going to be covering today is going to have the construction of the pre-nai form of a verb, which just basically means the negative nai form with the ending phrasing of nai dropped from it, plus the phrasing zaru o enai. And what this grammar pattern is going to basically translate to is to have no choice but to do verb that you use. Some other translations of this grammar pattern are cannot help but to verb, to be obliged to verb, to be compelled to do verb, etc. Basically, they'll all have the same general meaning of to have no choice but to do the verb. And so in terms of context or background information about this grammar pattern, I'm not too sure I know too much about it. This isn't a very common grammar pattern, although after our channel's years of making a bunch of videos, we've actually come across it either one or a couple of times. I don't know. It was definitely in one of our anime lines of the day, I believe. The one on rewrite, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, so this isn't too common a grammar pattern. In terms of the context, I am kind of just making a guess here, but I think if we want to kind of make sense of the construction, we have the zaru form of a verb, and it might qualify as its own form of a verb, but I don't know if it's used in any other grammar patterns. But basically, the reason why we use the pre-nai form of a verb plus zaru is because zaru might be a literary form of the negative nai form. It's kind of archaic, I'm not too sure. Then we have that phrasing right after it, which is o enai. And I believe enai sometimes followed the pre-mas form of a verb to mean can't do that verb. And so if we kind of want to loosely connect these, if zaru is kind of a more formal literary form of the negative nai form, which means to not do, then enai means can't, then that's going to kind of mean can't not do verb, and that in turn is going to pretty naturally translate into have no choice but to do verb. So that right there, that reasoning right there might be a good mnemonic device for you to remember what this grammar pattern means, but once again, don't quote me on the explanation that I just said right there, because I'm not too 100% sure on that. And so yeah, we are going to mention one last thing before we jump into the example sentences or the construction and then the example sentences, and that's just going to be the little note that one verb that we use with this grammar pattern is going to exhibit a special feature, and that of course is going to be the usual one that exhibits a special feature, the verb suru, which means to do. Our construction here says that we want to take the pre-nai form of a verb, which in suru's case would be she, because the nai form of suru is shinai. That's not going to be the case. The special thing we're going to do about this is we're going to use the character se instead of she. So instead of shi zaru o enai, we're going to be doing se zaru o enai. And so yeah, that kind of basically outlined the construction as well. What we have, once again, just to brief you what that is right before we jump to the example sentences. Pre-nai form of a verb, so basically a negative nai form with that nai at the end dropped, plus zaru plus o enai, which will translate to basically have no choice but to do verb, am compelled to do verb, am obligated to do verb. And this is pretty similar to a couple of grammar patterns that we've covered before, such as na ke reba narenai and shikanai. So if you don't know those grammar patterns, you might want to check them out, because those are definitely more common than this one. And of course, it's always good to study the alternate meanings, or the grammar patterns that have meanings that are kind of alterations of each other but have a general key meaning that are resembling of each other. I'm babbling. Let's just go on to the example sentences. So for our first example sentence, we are going to have the line kinyoubi made ni suki takereba hikoki de ikazaru o enai. And so what this line right here is going to translate to is if you want to arrive by Friday, then you have no choice but to go by airplane, basically. Okay, so if we break this down real quick, first up we see that our first word is kinyoubi, which is going to translate to Friday. We have made ni, which is going to mean by that time, so by Friday. That's just the combination of the two particles made and ni. We've covered that before. Right after that, we have a pretty complex conjugation of the verb suku, which means to arrive. So what we have is if you want to arrive. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to conjugate that into its tai form, which means to want to do the verb. Then the conditional ba form, which means if. So if you want to do that verb. So suku is going to change into sukitai. Then the tai will turn into takereba. So suki takereba is going to mean if you want to arrive. Attach that onto the phrasing kinyobi madeni. So if you want to arrive by Friday. And then we go into our next clause in the sentence, our second clause, and that is going to contain our usage of this grammar pattern here. So what we have is hikoki, which is the word for airplane. We have the particle de, which is going to be marking airplane as basically an instrument marker, the means in which you go. Then our verb right after that is going to be the verb go, iku. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this verb in our grammar pattern now. So if we take a look at the construction, then we see that we need this in its zaru form, which means it's going to be in its pre-nai form plus the phrasing zaru. So the nai form of iku is ika nai, and so we're going to drop that nai, and so ika is the pre-nai form of iku. Add on zaru, so ikazaru. So then we have ikazaru, then we add on that other phrasing, o and I. So ikazaru o and I means to have no choice but to go. Of course, in our example sentence here, that more specifically means have no choice but to go by plane. So if you want to arrive by Friday, you have no choice but to go by plane. Kinyobi made ni tsukitakereba hikoki de ikazaru o and I. Let's cover another example sentence. We have the line, Minna wa atarashii joshi o mitomezaru o enakatta. What this line right here is going to translate to is basically we all had no choice but to accept the new boss. Let's break this down bit by bit. First up, we have our first word, which is just going to be minna, which means everybody. This is going to be the subject of the sentence. We're going to mark it as such with the particle wa. So minna wa, everybody, or we, or us. But after that, we have the word atarashi, which means new. It's an adjective. It's going to be modifying the noun right after it, which is joshi, which is going to translate to boss. So new boss. New boss here is going to be the direct object of the verb action that's about to come. So we're going to mark it as such with the direct object marker o. And then we have our verb, and this is going to be the verb that we're going to be using in our grammar pattern. So our verb is mitomeru, which means to accept or to acknowledge, basically. We need this guy in its pre-nai form. So the nai form of mitomeru is going to be mitomenai. And so what we're going to do with that is going to drop the nai, so we just have mitome, basically. So what we're going to do with that then is we're going to add on zaru, which is then going to change it to mitomezaru. And then in line with the guidelines of this grammar pattern, we then add on the next phrasing, o enai, to mean to have no choice but to accept. One last thing that we want to do here, though, is we want to conjugate this grammar pattern into its past form, because we're talking about the past here. So what we're going to do that is we're going to take enai, which basically grammatically has the form of an e adjective. So to conjugate e adjectives into their past form, we're going to take inai, we're just going to turn it to enakatta. And so altogether, once again, we have the example sentence, Minna wa atarashii joshi o mitomezaru o enakatta. And that's going to translate to we, everybody, or we, because the context is that I'm a part of everybody, so we had no choice but to accept the new boss. We are now going to move on to our next and final example sentence, and so our line reads, Byoki ga yoku natte inakatta kara, byoin ni ikazaru ni enakatta. And so this example sentence that we have here is actually, coincidentally enough, kind of a combination of the peculiarities that our two previous examples exhibited, in that we're using the verb iku again, and we are now conjugating enai into its past form again. So this line right here is going to translate to, since my illness was not getting any better, I had no choice but to go to the hospital. So let's break this down in Japanese. First up, we have byoki, which is going to translate to sickness or illness. We have the particle ga marking as the subject. We have the adverb yoku, which means good or better. We have the verb naru, which means to become. So what we're kind of wanting to say here is to become better. But we're going to conjugate naru into its te form natte and put inakatta in there to mean was not getting better. So inakatta is going to be the negative past form of iru. So ordinarily, the te form of a verb plus the word iru would mean to be doing that verb, but we conjugate into its negative past form, so it was not doing that verb, so was not getting better. So my sickness was not getting better. That right there is a full-fledged clause. So what we can do now is add a conjunction to connect it to another clause to form our whole statement, our whole sentence here. So we're going to use the conjunction kara, which means because. So because my illness was not getting better, and now we just say what happened because of that. And in doing so, we are going to employ the grammar pattern that this video is about. So for our second clause in the sentence, we have the phrasing byoin ni ikazaru o enakatta. And provided that you know what that first word, byoin, means, you should probably be able to know what this clause means, because we pretty much covered all aspects of it in our previous example sentences. So if I told you right now that byoin means hospital, you should then know what this second clause is saying. So I'll give you like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to figure it out, and now I'm gonna help you out. So byoin means hospital. We're gonna use that as the location, so we're gonna mark it as the location with the particle ni. And now we're gonna put our verb action in there. We're gonna stick in the verb iku, which means to go, and we want to use it in this grammar pattern. So we want to say, what we're gonna say is to have no choice but to go to the hospital because my sickness or my illness was not getting better. And so what do we do here? It's basically a repeat of our previous example sentences. We change iku into ikazaru, add on the phrasing o and I, but we want to say this happened in the past, and so we conjugate enai into enakatta. So byoin ni ikazaru o enakatta means had no choice but to go to the hospital. Altogether, once again, the whole sentence, byoki ga yoku natte inakatta kara, byoin ni ikazaru o enakatta. Since my illness was not getting any better, I had no choice but to go to the hospital. And so yeah, that is going to be our final example sentence covering this grammar pattern. The pre-ない-Form of a verb plus the phrasing zaru o enai to mean to have no choice but do that verb, similar to the much more common grammar patterns, na kereba naらないor shikaない. So check those out. You definitely should if you don't know them. Hopefully you learned something from this video though, and if you ever do encounter this, it does appear occasionally in both casual and formal speech and written language. It's appeared in some anime shows that I've seen, so definitely worth knowing. As per the norm, if the example sentence that we covered in this video lesson weren't enough for you, we have a couple more in the description below or on our official post on our website of this grammar pattern, so check those out. Check out the website and all those resources and a bunch of stuff, and yeah, keep on learning Japanese. See you next time for the next grammar lesson.